Hello and welcome to the Linebreak Rugby podcast with me, your host Sav. Today we have Ed, another Englishman, and it's going to be a two-man pod because everybody else is either actually at their day job or ill.
Has been inconvenienced by an earthquake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fov's internet or Corey's internet has been destroyed by the earthquake apparently. So he couldn't come on and talk about New Zealand getting their frustrations out on Italy. Which I think is quite a sad thing to do. You know, Italy are the beaten child of Europe at the moment, I think.
Yeah. Though I suppose it's not all bad news for New Zealand because I think they did discover in Lima Sapoanga that they actually have someone who can kick goals, which is something they've been sorely lacking with Barrett.
That is actually quite true.
Silver linings.
Although, I don't know, Lima Sapoanga, I've looked at the stats and his kicking goals. Wow, apparently he can step up and knock them over. National rugby, international rugby even, so maybe that's all. Right, shall we start with our players of the weekend then?
No, that's what we usually do.
That's what we normally do. And, well, first off, we obviously need to have a roundup of what happened over the weekend, and I think, Ed, you've got the knowledge of all the scores on the doors.
I am technically cheating. Granted, I would have known most of them, but I do have it in front of me at the moment. Munster did the incredible, and they beat the Maori All Blacks. Just as a side note, as a tangent, after just the first entry there, Ireland now have current victories against the Black Ferns, which is the women's team, the full New Zealand team, as of last Saturday, the Maori team, thanks to Munster, and the New Zealand under-20s, thanks to the under-20s World Championship from back in the summer, which is quite impressive. So, New Zealand, what are you playing at? You never let them win, and now suddenly they've got 4 on the bounce. It's all gone very wrong.
Yeah. I'm just going to double-check something, because I'm not entirely sure whether my recording is recording.
That's pretty good. I'll carry on anyway while you check that, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if it does work, this is just going to sound like we are very amateur at this, aren't we? Anyway, okay, the Barbarians beat Fiji in what was so much more one-sided than I was hoping. Because I figured Barbarians with the players they were playing and Fiji being Fiji, both teams would throw the ball around with just reckless abandon, and it would be incredibly entertaining. It was still incredibly entertaining, but very one-sided on the Barbarian side. Barbarians having my good player of the week, and he's had a very good couple of weeks, in fact. Georgia played Japan and just lost. I could never quite work out my emotions in that match, whether I was just incredibly disappointed for Georgia or ecstatic for Japan. Because I couldn't decide. There was like 5 minutes throughout the entire match where I decided I want a team to win. And it was an extremely fun game to watch. New Zealand took out their feelings.
Sorry, I just want to talk about Georgia and Japan. Yeah. I feel like that's the real battle for who's top of the second tier of rugby nowadays. It used to be the Pacific Islanders and Italy.
Are we counting the Pacific Islanders as like 1.5, or are they? Which camp are they sitting in?
I feel like Fiji and Samoa are underperforming for quite a while now.
Yeah, I mean,
they've had a complete talent drain. We actually do need to quickly resync. So at the end, I can edit this bit.
Okay.
I'll just do 3, 2, 1.
Sync.
Cool.
Well, that'll make it entertaining.
That'll be middle of the thing.
Worth noting, back in the summer, Georgia played, I think, Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa.
Mm-hmm.
Beat Fiji and Tonga, drew with Samoa, which I think is their best record yet. So they are very much on the up. This is
I'm interested for the future of Georgia, and I think we have been for a while. We can see that they're rising through the ranks, and the country as a whole is clearly taking rugby very seriously.
I think it's something that CC mentioned on Reddit the other day, that again we're going to start going into lots of tangents, in that there should be, the way World Rugby at the moment is kind of doing their best to lift Tier 2, as far as I can work out, is basically just to have games in America, because they can milk the shit out of it and get absurd they can capitalise on it by literally capitalising on it. And I feel, granted they're getting money, I'm not entirely sure that's best for the rugby world. And there was a rather large debate that I don't think I ever got around to finishing answering with regards to Georgia and where they stand in the Six Nations pecking order, and if they should join, or when they should join, or why they should join.
I think for Georgia, it's just a case of being given the opportunity to prove.
Well, that is a lot of it.
They have access to the big markets.
The issue, I think, at the moment, because while Canada and the USA are not bad teams, I feel like World Rugby should be putting more of their attention towards the likes of Georgia and Romania.
Yeah, for sure. I think
Romania. And just worth pointing out,
the big players, shall we say, the big money earners, being the RFU and perhaps, well, just generally Super Rugby as a whole. I wouldn't say they're big money players, but they're certainly the ones with ambition.
Yeah.
And the ones that have the highest quality of rugby, if we say that. I don't know, maybe not. But they're not necessarily wanting to give Georgia
I know.
a chance,
I think it's...
You know.
I'm starting to wonder whether some of the Six Nations unions are perhaps wary of giving Georgia and Romania a chance, in case that if they do perform well, they're going to start getting faced with lots of uncomfortable questions they don't want to know the answers to. There might be that might not be. It could just be a bit of a...
We started, and now I'm going to have to, because I'm about to bring it up, we started looking into the stats behind the RFU and the stats behind just different countries around the world, the number of refs they have, the number of players they have, the number of women they have.
Was this to do with the sleeping rugby, the sleeping giant that you kind of you took on its own course, and because that is its own thing. I would like to be a part of, but go on with that.
It's
the premise.
Just looking the you
just
can take the
worth
premise,
pointing out that it's long been said that the USA is the sleeping giant of rugby, and when that particular union decides to give a shit, America will wake up and suddenly start laying waste to the entire rugby landscape and win everything and be amazing and be the best. And quite frankly, I think that's bollocks. And a point I saw made a fair while ago now was that England are in fact the sleeping giant of rugby, whereas I suppose the best way to put it, in the fact that the union they have, the money and the resources they have available to them, the last 13 years, you could say, they've been underperforming via a very long stretch. Eddie Jones said in an interview a couple of months ago that due to said money and said resources and the player base, we should always be in a position to win the Six Nations, but it's only happened twice now since the year we won the World Cup. Eddie Jones is doing his best to unlock the potential that we have, and I think that potential, when reached, is it scales heights much further than what anybody might think USA perhaps is capable of.
So my broken keyboard is completely and utterly limiting me. I can't even type docs out because two of the letters D and S on my keyboard aren't working. But essentially, I have the stats written out on Google Docs, and I think the most surprising fact is England have a very small amount of refs, which gives me the impression that perhaps it's reasonably toxic to be a referee. Like registered refs,
no shit.
Registered refs in England appear to just be at an all-time low, especially when you compare it to France and New Zealand, South Africa, even Australia. And we've got playing numbers that are close or over 2 million. We've got registered players over 2 million, whereas these other countries, and I wish I had it right in front of me now, but they're almost a tenth of that. And you look at the player numbers that we have and the player numbers that New Zealand and Australia and South Africa have, and you think, how is it possible that we are so not far behind, but even competing with this? The money, the player numbers, just and the resources, and just we've got stadiums inbuilt in this country as well. It's not like we are limited, or training facilities. This is some of the best stuff in the world, and yet we're not overperforming these other countries which don't have that. So there's got to be something else missing. I'm not really sure what it is. But I took it on a whole new tangent from what Ed wanted to do it. He was talking about, obviously, the sleeping giant system and how England are underperforming. I then started looking at the player numbers for women. And for me, it was incredibly surprising that we have, I think it was 26%. I can't see the numbers in front of me right now. I'm still trying to get D to work on my keyboard. Oh, there we go.
Copy and paste it from somewhere else.
There's a D. Nailed it. Right. But I think it was 26% of women. 26% of the playing numbers were women in Britain. Or not Britain, England, specifically England. And it was such a small amount for the other countries. I think 9% was the next highest. And I was just looking at it thinking, how has it managed to be so low? And I think it was 2% in Australia. Ridiculously low. The sort of numbers that you would expect of a country that didn't even acknowledge women existed. And it was just a little bit surprising.
Is this percentage, is this out of all adults registered to play? 26 women,
yeah,
74 men.
Women.
Okay.
It was something like I'm really struggling to search here. But yeah, other articles.
I wonder how that would change when it came to sevens, or if there's even a distinction at all.
That would be interesting, because obviously we've had Charlotte Caslick and Emily Scarrett and
Sarah Hunter.
These big name rugby players, and obviously the Rugby World Cup. I think these numbers were taken from before the Rugby World Cup. So the participation will have increased. The player numbers will hopefully have gone up. Certainly they'll have worked a lot harder on bringing people in, because I think they're suddenly seeing it as a viable option. There's a lot of women in this country. There's a lot of women around the world that will want to play rugby, that will want to watch rugby. So it's another market that I think but the problem is they're seeing it as, is it a market? I think I don't know. I'll get bogged down in monetization and stuff, because it annoys me when that's the be all and end all of a sport that's meant to be enjoyable. But I think that's just the way it gets driven. So
yeah,
there it is. Right, should we actually talk about the players that we liked and lost? Because I think we. Yeah.
I'll very quickly, just to finish it off, and then we can tangent after. New Zealand took out all of their feelings on Italy. England broke a decade-long streak. I think it was 12 matches we've lost against South Africa. Last being in 2006, England finally won, and in fairly convincing fashion. Scotland came so close to avenging their World Cup loss to Australia, and in the last, I think, 5 minutes, despite being a player up, had it snatched away from them. France smashed Samoa really convincingly. I think Vakatawa, he scored a hat-trick.
Yeah.
Wales played one of the most frustrating games I've ever watched them play, to eke out a win against Argentina, with neither side playing even remotely close to what I think they're capable of. We might touch on that later. I've already pissed off a number of Welsh fans this past weekend. I'm sure I could look for another opportunity to do so again, or try and vindicate myself, and that's unlikely. And Ireland played Canada with a fairly second-string team, I think. Lots of different players too, when they beat the All Blacks last week. But Canada by no means gave a poor account of themselves and managed to score 3 tries and converted all of them.
Well, according to Joe Smits...
and not a single penalty was kicked that game at the posts, which I think is awesome.
That's a very interesting stat. I actually had no idea that happened.
Because I can't remember the last time that's happened in a game. I remember a couple of years ago, Wales against Australia. The whole first half went by without a single scrum, and it was cause for mass celebration. And so the fact that not a single penalty was kicked at goal...
I think... So,
successfully or unsuccessfully,
so that's a success, right? No penalties kicked at goal is a success. No scrums in the first half is a success, right? That's legitimately the way we're seeing it, because there's a lot of people who just, obviously you can enjoy the scrum if you participate in the scrum and you love watching the scrum and the battle that happens there. Obviously you can enjoy it, but that's not what, I mean, it is what rugby is about, but it's not what we want rugby to be about.
Yeah, a scrum every now and again is all right, but when it starts happening, which I think was to bring it back to Wales Argentina, I think the second quarter was basically the biggest slogfest of all slogfests I've ever seen in a rugby game.
Yeah.
Where it was constantly scrum, scrum, line out maul, line out maul, line out maul, scrum, 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 all within like, I don't know, 5 meters of Argentina's try line, and it made for a very, very
boring.
It was unspectacular. And you go to watch some of these games for the spectacle of it all, and I mean, for one, I imagine if you were sitting in the opposite corner for that match, you must have been bored stiff.
Well, the drama for me in that moment is obviously the number of times that Wales had a go, knocked on the door of the Argentinian line, and just didn't manage to get over. And I was sitting there thinking, if they don't get over, I don't think they can win this game.
I did think for a time, I thought, certainly towards the end of it, that an Argentinian should have been yellow carded in that passage of play, or
they kept
that 10-20 minutes, and then it eventually went to a scrum which Argentina won and massively let Wales off the hook. But I mean, if you remember I really don't want to bring up any World Cup demons because that'll come back to haunt me, but against 13 men in the World Cup, they couldn't score for like 5 or 10 minutes. So they're capable of some extremely impressive things and some very good rugby. And they're also not sometimes. The disparity is rather large, which is a shame.
But Wales have this. I'll call it a conundrum, I suppose, coming up with their back row. They've got 3 or 4 very good back row forwards.
Moriarty belongs in that back row. Going by just what I've seen of the last 2 games, though.
But I watched Warburton as well, and Warburton had a blinder.
Yeah.
He played very well, and I think they've got Tipuric, Lydia, Faletau when he comes back, Moriarty. They've got a lot of players that want to be in that back row, and it's a good thing. But still.
Dan Lydiot, I think, is something of Wales's golden boy, or he certainly has been in the past. But I've seen a lot of talk of thinking that he doesn't belong in the team anymore, which I find quite surprising. Granted, I don't know too much about the goings on or how well he's been performing at club.
His style. So he's not the, and I think this is obviously a cliche, but he's not the guy who runs 50 meters down the pitch like Tipuric and throws a dummy. And
no,
scores
but I mean,
post.
When you talk about a 6 doing the hard work or the unseen work, or being very dogged at what he's doing, I think when they won in 2012 the final match against France, he was everywhere. Like, the moment any frog got the ball, they were just chopped down at the knees, and so Lydiot chopped them down, and then Sam was over to contest.
Over the top, and that was.
So it's worked well in the past.
That was peak Wales.
Has been very successful, but whether that's not happening now or the reasons as to why.
So we talk about. So I'm gonna take us back to where we should have gone at the beginning and talk
Good
about
players,
my
bad
favourite
players.
player for the weekend. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Chris Robshaw actually.
Oh, go on then, love it.
And it is because so I think a lot of the blame, obviously from the World Cup, got put on Robshaw, in a mixture of rightly, wrongly, because obviously captain decisions on the day may have lost us the game against Wales. Not necessarily going for the corner, but going to the front of the line out was probably the decision that I most disagreed with, and perhaps I don't know who called that, but they took it as a team. Robshaw's the face of that team, and he took a hit to his reputation, should we say? He's obviously not that caring about the hit to his reputation. He hit him hard, but he's come back, and he's just Mr. Reliable. Every single time that you think, we need somebody to make this hit on a massive ball carrier, Robshaw's the guy there. You want someone clearing out a ruck, Robshaw's the guy there. You need someone to take 3 yards forward, set the ball back, and reset for the back line. Robshaw's the guy to carry the ball. So
I think he's got to be one of the hardest working players at any level of rugby at the moment, and he has been for a while.
His engine is. And it's so cliche to say it, but it's unbelievable.
Well, no, I think
keeps going.
There's an odd thing. You know how usually people will say that the captain is generally the first name on the team sheet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think Robshaw is still our first name on the team sheet, but captain-wise, I like how he's been since he lost that particular responsibility. I think his whole game has stepped up.
Guy. Yeah, he's an under the radar guy. So I think yes, he was a great face, and he's very he's actually very good at communication. So when they put him in front of the media and stuff, he was good. But he's not a flamboyant character, really.
Yeah.
And I think that you don't need a flamboyant character to deal with the media, but it certainly helps.
Yeah, otherwise, because of course the other side of that is Mike Brown after the Wales game in the World Cup, where I think he was the most despondent anyone has ever been in an interview. But it's
for sure. That was funny. I think I don't think anybody really took anything against him. Well, they probably did.
I think a lot of people held it against him.
People don't like Mike Brown. Yeah.
No, he's very angry. I've gone off him a lot.
People don't like Mike Brown. He reacts on instinct to quite a lot of things, and Anyway, we now need to talk about your player of the
weekend. Mike. We go to bad players after then, or
we'll go to bad players.
My good player has got to be. I'm going to try and pronounce this properly first time round. I believe it's Tankeli Nairavoro. I nailed that one. Yes, for the Barbarians.
He is absolutely monstrous.
He is amazing. I properly love the Barbarians. I think I've got to say, of all the rugby shirts I own, I don't own a Barbarians one, and I think I probably should.
Need to invest.
They are so much fun to watch, and I've said it repeatedly on this podcast. What is this bollocks? I've suddenly got some. Okay.
Go on.
I've said. Fuck's sake! I've said repeat. My phone's acting up while I'm trying to look at stuff on the rugby app.
Well, basically, I just watched a couple of clips of him.
Yeah, go on. You start.
I've watched a couple of clips, and the way not a couple of clips. I actually watched quite a bit of the game as well. The way he carries the ball, he can hold it in one hand above his head as if it's tucked under his jumper or something. It looks incredibly secure. So when he's smashing through tackles, and I mean like ragdolling defenders, it just looks comfortable. I don't know. I've never seen someone do something as if, there's kind of a small child in my way, and he kind of brushes them aside and then like basketball alley-oops it to another player.
I'm just going to interrupt. You say that his opposite number does the exact same thing, because in Nemani Ndolo, you've got another player who is massive, who breezes past everyone or through them like they weren't even there.
Yeah. So I mean,
it's a new breed of player.
It is, but it's the deft touches that I think confuse everyone.
Yeah.
Because we're used to Matt Banahan.
Yeah, but whereas someone so large and perhaps who looks like they might be very cumbersome is extremely nimble and very light on your feet. But yeah, that is one of the things I loved watching players just run around the park with the ball in one hand, just waving that arm about while they try and gain their bearings or get their balance. Mm-hmm. And then it means the moment the tackle's in, they've immediately got the offload on. But I've said repeatedly over the last few weeks or on this podcast before that how the Barbarians play is just stupid amounts of fun. In the past 2 years, the games they've played at the end of the year against some of the bigger teams have been nothing short of spectacular to watch.
I can't agree more.
I think he kind of has embodied and what's the word? Epitomizes everything that the Barbarians are, and so that free running, that will to throw the ball around like it doesn't matter, but while still doing it with just so much assured skill, is an incredibly beautiful thing to watch. I mean, that's why I was so disappointed with the game against Fiji, because I kind of expected the Fijian side to be doing the same thing. Yeah. And there's something not clicking there at the moment, but
Fiji,
it is.
I don't know.
It's still there for the Barbarians. So I think they ran in. The tour that they've currently had. In fact, that's what I wanted to bring up. Aside from the fact that Will Greenwood has long been one of my favourite figures in rugby, as a player for a start, and then where he's gone on since then, as a spokesman, as a pundit, when he does all that halftime analysis with the interactive board for Sky Sports. Mm-hmm. And for the Barbarians game, last week they played. Who did they play? They played. I think they played a club team. Oh shit! Let's get this right.
No, they played. They played. I know they played a Pole or a Czech team.
They played the Czech Republic 2 or 3 days ago.
Republic, yeah.
And it was a wash, but it was incredible.
And the Barbarian, by the way, anyone who's not following the Barbarians Twitter account needs to be following the Barbarians Twitter account, because that was some of the funniest. Like, the guy running that is on fun. Top form. Yeah.
But what I think is worth pointing out is Will Greenwood was, I don't know what his official capacity was, whether he was part of the coaching setup or the managing side of the Barbarians this tour, but he was having so much fun with just everything. So he was on the sidelines and he was encouraging all of the players. He was calling Nanai the skinny kid, which I think was saying, for a skinny kid, not bad, or something like that. So the attitude he's had for the whole thing. Oh, South Africa, it was a draw, 31-31 at Wembley.
Yeah, that was the high scorer, wasn't it?
Amazing to watch. And South Africa, I've never got back to this, but South Africa, I was worried would just bully their way up the park after a few things Alistair Coetzee has said on press conferences. But they played some sublime rugby as well, and both sides scored some great tries. But some of the moves that the Barbarians started using for a penalty near the sideline, they put like 3 pods of players, right, middle, left, and rather than kicking for the posts, they actually just punted the ball up and under, landed around the posts, and the moment the kick was made, all 3 pods ran forward. The try wasn't scored, but if it had been, it would have been one for the ages. It was beautiful to watch.
Chaos. It's one of those things.
So he's had his part there, and his parts on the sidelines, just bigging up the players, and his personality just shone through, and I thought it was incredible.
There's been moments when I enjoy the behind-the-scenes stuff, perhaps, that rugby does, and actually I think it humanises the players. You see them in the Barbarians, and rather than that working professional, which we see week in, week out, trying to win, you see them chilled, and you see them doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. I mean, at the end of the day, they're rugby players. They're having fun, and I think the Barbarians really does showcase that. And I think it's a brilliant way of advertising the game as well, which is why it's being played at Wembley and why they're going to the Czech Republic even and doing stuff like that. It's brilliant. I think it's really, really good. And it's one of the strongest things that I think World Rugby can do is advertise that sort of mentality of inclusiveness, getting people from all around the world together in one team and going out there and advertising the sport. Because I think other ways of doing it aren't quite as ethically sound, shall we say.
Well, that's a bit disappointing. It doesn't show up there. I'm just disappointed. I think the game against the Czech Republic, I think, was for the 100th anniversary of their rugby union being established. So for the Barbarians to go and visit there for that, I think is, again, it's as awesome and as brilliant as a tradition as the Barbarians is. The fact that they can go and do that, I think, is just extra special.
And it was a wash. I mean, I was watching the Twitter and they were having lots of fun. The number of puns that were coming out from the Barbarian Twitter feed was brilliant. It was kind of like, check this out, and other ones that are far more clever or insightful than that. But it was a great follow. That actually.
Yeah. And it's just for a lot of players, the older players, it's a great swan song. It's a great way to sign off on your career as a rugby player by playing in one of these tours. And so that, as well as because I doubt Andy Ellis is going to be doing that much playing anymore.
And he's scoring, but he's scoring a lot of sneaky little tries. Actually,
he was. I think he's been one of the standout players of the Barbarians tour.
And he had to run. I think it was about
60 meters.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say 70, but 60. He ran a hell of a long way for one of them. Yeah. And when he got there and scored, he looked so tired.
Oh, completely gassed. It was.
He was dead. It was one of the funniest things I've seen. It was like watching a kind of a Legends game where someone has just gone.
You mean the try that Steve Thompson scored a few years ago?
Yeah, and he was just tired, and instead of oxygen, they were offering him a beer.
He had a pint, yeah. That's still, yeah. Oh, that's got to be one of my favourite moments the last few years.
One of those fantastic things.
So, Tankili Nairavoro, I think.
What else did we watch? Oh, we watched the, well, I don't know if we watched, CC watched. You were watching as well, the Red Roses.
Oh yeah, I watched them play against. I watched most of the game against France women and some of the game against Ireland women. And
I watched the game against France.
There was something I read on the sub recently that I thought it looked to be heavily downvoted, and it seemed fairly controversial. But there was a part of it I did agree with, in that something I found. I do it to get this out there. I do enjoy watching women's rugby, for no other reason than it is rugby, and so I enjoy watching most levels of rugby. But there is something, or has been something I found, whereas I don't get. Whereas for, watching Ireland against New Zealand and cheering on Ireland as though they were my own team, or watching the England, the main squad play in the Six Nations or the Autumn Internationals, when I watch those kind of teams play, I am absurdly hyperactive, and I am jumping up and down, and I am clapping and cheering and wooing and roaring until I can't speak properly for the day or two after.
I think I know where you're going.
I don't
you're not
have that
the
with
hype.
the women, and I still enjoy watching the game, but I don't know whether it's.
See, I think
I'm
I found
about to
my
worry
hype.
about coming off very sexist in a second, but
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's just because the skill set is clearly there, but there's just a lacking in, I suppose, finesse or.
You're looking for.
There's a point I'm
you're-
trying to make out, which I'm not sure how to phrase properly,
Well,
but it's not
I found
as
my hype
enjoyable, or it's not as.
For that level of rugby in the Olympics. I really found it because I was watching it, and I was just watching these girls just going hammer and tongs at each other constantly.
That was fantastic,
and it was absolutely it was a fantastic watch. And then I switched on to watch the England-France game, and there were certain things that you were watching the skill set, and it would go a couple of phases, and it would be really fantastic. And the defense was actually phenomenal. I was trying to watch their structures, and it's obvious that they've worked a lot on the structures of defense, and it was very hard to break down. The main problem that I found, and I think it's the same thing if you'd watched a championship level game, is that the defense was a lot stronger than the attack.
Yeah.
And so in certain phases, when there was a clean break, it was fantastic. But the problem was that it was a clean break on their own. Whoever it was would break on their own, and then they'd be looking for support.
Yeah, but it wasn't there.
And it wasn't quite there because I don't know why. Maybe the game was because I've only watched an isolated game, so perhaps it wasn't the same thing. But yeah, but I was still getting excited when that break happened. I was on the edge of my seat trying to cheer her over the line and watch it happen and things. I don't know. I did get excited when we were beating the French in certain case. And certainly, I think the style. I don't know if it was the 10 style. Katie McLean. England owe a lot to her. I would say.
Yeah.
She's been there. She's been a stalwart forever, and her positional and directional kicking out of hand has been fantastic. And perhaps I would say this of any 10. I wish that she played closer to the gain line a little bit, because I'm getting frustrated watching an England backline move happen so far back, and then a French defence, which is quite strong on the blitz, push us backwards and backwards and backwards, and eventually she then has to kick it because she keeps standing too far back. So my one thing for that is perhaps it's the style that England are playing, and perhaps it's not necessarily the fault of it being women's rugby.
Yeah, well, that's possible. I mean, like you, I thought I fully got behind, I suppose, all the teams at the Olympics, men's, women's, and all the countries. But it's maybe. I mean, we're playing the Black Ferns this Saturday. Ireland women playing Canada women.
Well, here we go. I've got the stats up in front of me now. So the England participation for women is 28%. So the 28% of the playing numbers in England is pretty high. 28%, considering, well, certainly in comparison to the rest of the world. The next highest is New Zealand at 9%.
Yeah.
9%. So we have 20 more percent of registered female players in the country, which is mental. We should be absolutely walking all over these teams. It shouldn't really be close. And I get that New Zealand have the resources and the facilities.
They've got the grassroots. That's the thing. I think that's a great deal of it, because even though player numbers and even ratios and percentages, they're a lot smaller. But I mean, it's odd because girls playing rugby, women playing rugby, it's not something that has ever struck me.
But here's the raw numbers.
Yeah,
so you've
go on.
got 14,000 women in New Zealand. So in 2011, there were 14,000.
Yeah, this is registered players, yeah?
Yeah, registered players. That was the women. And in England, there is over 500,000.
Jesus, that's quite impressive.
Do you know? But you see those numbers. There's over 500,000 registered players versus 14,000.
Yeah, and then out of that 500,000, it's difficult to find 23 that are competitive with.
But then there's got to be something wrong with the system. Yes, we're getting the players registered. Yes, we're getting them going, but they're obviously not being fed or trained in the right way.
I think because rugby is such. We've gone on a massive tangent, by the way. We need to get back to the bad rugby players. If you think about how big the no, because I want to whinge about something. If you think about how big, how encapsulating rugby is as part of just the culture in New Zealand, grassroots rugby for girls just doesn't strike me as something that is incredibly big or pervasive over here. So it's.
But you look at the numbers, and obviously they're getting registered. I don't think.
Well, I mean, there is it. You do have to take into account for a start that New Zealand has a population of 4 million, and we have a population of I think 55 in England.
Yeah.
So I mean, granted, so that's
proportion of the population.
There's
still
still. I mean, proportionally, the ratio we're still on the larger side of that line, but it is still.
I mean, as a percentage of the it is a percentage of the registered players. The raw numbers tell a story that we're drawing from a much wider pool. But I've still taken the percentage, which should equal out. Obviously, it won't equal out the proportions of the population, but will equal out the proportions of rugby playing individuals.
Yeah.
And 28% versus 9%. I mean, these numbers may have gone up for the other countries, and they may have even gone up for England.
I'm sure. Wait, when were these numbers taken? Sorry.
So the Australian one's the only recent one. The Australian one was taken in 2015. The rest of them were taken in 2011 or 2012.
Because God, that's ages back. Because there was in 2014 there was the Women's World Cup, and there's another one next year.
Yeah. But and obviously I need to try and look, but the problem is that Wikipedia hasn't updated, and I have to go to the individual sites, which is actually quite hard because they release them in these huge PDFs as part of some sort of campaign for, I don't know, free knowledge or something, and you have to really siphon through all sorts of other things to try and figure out just how many registered players there are, and it just takes a while, and downloading a lot of different documents to try and find the right one.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but I do eventually find these PDFs, and it just takes forever to try and figure them out.
Yeah. Well.
Right. Let's. You said you wanted a whinge.
Yeah. I just want to have a quick whinge, and it's
have a whinge.
I mean, I'm sure there were many aspects of this weekend that I could have had a whinge about, but it's. Yeah. Do you remember in Jonathan Joseph's breakout season, he had some of those great breaks where he'd like have a bit of a shimmy and then he'd pass someone around the outside with, you know, I miss that player because of what I've seen at Bath. Of the few games for Bath I've seen, I found it frustrating to watch when he's got the ball, but kind of the biggest indictment of the player I feel like he's become, because I kind of feel like after his first season he was a bit found out. And I've been told I'm wrong on that by a few Bath fans, but maybe I am, but that's how I see it.
He's been found out at international level. I don't care what he's doing.
The thing that
Bath
just
level.
Killed me on Saturday is I think somewhere around the 70th minute, 65th, it wasn't too long after he'd come on, we turned the ball over close to our line, and the ball shipped out wide, and it got to him, and he had at least two players on the outside to his right, and he ran straight into contact, and it pissed me off so much. And it's just, but it didn't surprise me, and I kind of felt like the Jonathan Joseph of you know, a year or two ago, he would have either chipped ahead or, you know, done a little dart and then tried to gash around the outside, or at least gotten the pass away. I mean, Brown, despite how poor it was, at least did manage to get the pass away to May for the try, rather than himself finding contact. But There's
Oh,
just
that pass! Oh my god!
That pass was complete
Brown's
dog shit, and it was
pass.
so. I mean, I expect so much better from him, but this isn't a rant about Brown. It's a rant about JJ, and I think the player he has become is a way off the mark from where he was when he, broke through. And I am so pleased, thrilled, in fact, that Elliot Daly gave such a good account of himself. Not just with that cannon of a boot, but I think on attack, on defence, I thought he had a great game, and I'm thrilled for him. And I think JJ's form needs to massively improve at club level before he's close to having his shirt back off Daly.
I tend to agree. I think it was not really a problem with. I hate putting players in boxes like X will never pass, or
I probably do a lot of that.
Y will charge into contact far too often, because obviously players will react to their environment. But there was a moment in the World Cup where Joseph carried, and I think everyone will remember this. He scored the try, so it was perfectly fine, and he scored the try, and everybody forgave him. But I think he had Watson clean outside him.
Yeah.
And he threw a dummy and crashed through a tackle and kind of made a very awkward score.
Yeah.
Rather than give one pass out and then Watson just dive over in the corner.
Don't actually remember this. Who was this against?
It may have even. It wasn't the Uruguay game because Slade was playing. It might have been Fiji.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly the game, but his we'll have to see which game he scored in, because he definitely scored the try. I just remember that afterwards in the post-game interview, he even mentioned the fact that he knew Watson would have had the easy run in.
Yeah.
I think he in his, because he's got a reasonably posh accent. He said something like, "Oh, I knew Anthony was going to be absolutely fuming at me" or something. He basically acknowledged that he should have given the pass, basically. And I was just thinking to myself, he knew that he should have given the pass, but he also knows that he's fighting for that England spot at the 13.
Yeah.
So I think, whilst this hyper-competitive, you get dropped on a knife edge sort of environment is interesting, and certainly Eddie Jones appears to be bringing out the best in certain players, I think for players like Joseph, where he sees his shirt under threat constantly, it's very hard for him to be a team player, because obviously he wants his stats and his numbers to just reflect that he's doing well.
Yeah. Just to point out very quickly, let's just double check, because it might be all the difference here. I think Nick, Jack, Henry, Anthony, Nick, Anthony. JJ didn't score a try in the World Cup.
He didn't score, so there you go. Maybe it was after World Cup, because I am thinking under Eddie Jones, so it might have been Australia.
Might have been Six Nations or Australia, yeah.
Yeah. Because I am thinking under Eddie Jones in my head.
Fair enough.
Which is why it wouldn't have made that much sense about the hyper-competitive.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. I'm trying to. When did he last score? Let's find Joseph's last score then at international level.
Oh, all right then.
He didn't score at the World Cup. Oh, he was injured. He had his ribs done, didn't he?
Yeah, but I'm sure he played for a couple of. Maybe not, because we had Burgess coming through, didn't we?
Yeah, he had his ribs injured. I just vividly remember that try in the left-hand corner.
Yeah.
And it being a bit of a bungled affair, but it's fine. I mean, yeah.
He played. When is
somebody came up in the sub and mentioned? So we're talking about England almost exclusively. We're two Englishmen. The Kiwi who was going to come on, had an earthquake.
Yeah.
But there was
what a crap excuse.
There was the theoretical idea of, injuries aside, you pick your best team that you personally wanted to pick.
Yeah.
And I think this can be a case for us to have a little whinge about Mike Brown now.
Because Alex Good should be being picked, and it's the time for... I feel bad for him. I honestly do. For a long time, I was saying that he wasn't good enough and he was a crap player and I didn't like him. Mm-hmm. And that was, again, probably me putting players in boxes and really not seeing enough of him in Sarri's colours, and perhaps probably a nasty side that was Harlequin's bias shining through in that, oh, how dare he unseat Mike Brown, when in fact the form he's had over the last 18 months has more than warranted his selection over Brown.
I would tend to agree. I mean, he's playing in a side, and he's playing, I would say, as a reasonable leading role. Certainly when Saracens have been at trouble, he's almost stepped up to be the second playmaker at 10, along obviously with Barrett and I've forgotten Marcelo Bosch in the centres. Those three have really been an absolute staple for Saracens, and he's played well. Every time the ball gets kicked to him, his counter-attacking game has looked good. His positional kicking and his awareness of where to strike and when it's safer to just put the ball out into touch. He makes the right decisions most of the time. And I think Saracens play a very calculated way.
Yeah.
And I think if Eddie Jones ever wants to play in a way that's, shall we say, test match rugby, you're playing to win, you play in a certain way to win, then I think Good is often the option.
Yeah. He does also act as another playmaker, and so in effect, the team we've got two in Ford, and Farrell is, that axis in the midfield. Mm-hmm. But to have another one is just, I suppose it would adds a bit more dynamism, because I feel like so many of the aspects of his games are stronger than Brown's. Either they are or they have been, in that his running from deep I feel it has to be so underrated, because he can cut through teams like any other fullback. And I think the only thing that Brown has over Good at the moment is his left boot. But he hasn't been using that much. And I saw there was an article, Eddie Jones has said he doesn't plan on handing out, I think he called them confetti caps, for the Fiji game. He wants to play a full strength side. But I do kind of feel like this is the time, firstly, drop Yard and put Rocco in his place, because, again, he's earned it. I think if you're going to test the waters, no discredit to Fiji, it's probably better to do it against them than it is South Africa. But I feel like this is the game, if not now, then whenever. Because I feel like if not now, it will be never. That Good probably deserves that spot, and he deserves to show what he is capable of at test level, but I fear it won't happen.
I do tend to agree with you, and it's quite interesting about these confetti caps, and I do understand Eddie Jones's point of view, but I also think that he's kind of being disrespectful to the way that England's been managed beforehand, and obviously we shouldn't take offence to that because it's just the way he is, but it's not like they were handing confetti caps out previously. They were giving players who they thought were worth a shot and see if they could make the step up to international level. And if those players had performed well, I'm trying to think of perhaps people that I think he might call Wade a confetti cap, for example.
Yeah, but I'm thinking more of, there is this general, because other teams will use. I mean, Ireland against Canada this past weekend, I'm sure a fair few players played that weren't first choice because Joe was, giving them a shot, giving them a moment to shine and, contest, put their hand up. And teams will do that to tier 2 opposition, might occasionally do it to Italy, you never know. Maybe it's just I think the point he was trying to make completely was that he doesn't want...
He wants a first-string team.
The England team that has been playing for the last 10, 11 months, the team that he's carried through to the 10 wins, he wants that momentum to carry on and for the team to stay as close as it can be to the team that it still is, I suppose.
It might explain why he's only picked Youngs and Kerr, to be honest with you, because I can't see why there's not a reason why Robson should be in the wider training squad, why he shouldn't be learning the... tactics behind,
especially over Lazowski.
Yeah, because Lazowski, we've got a million 10s sitting in there. It's not like we're short
other
of
backs
10s.
You can play at 10.
Yeah, it's not like we're short of 10s. Yes, he's proven himself at Saracens. Yes, he is playing 10 week in, week out. But 10s are not a shortage. We've got people who will learn the systems. He's very new to the game. Robson's been around for a while. He's played for the Saxons. If you look at it, it's just it is a bit bizarre. If Kerr or Youngs gets an injury, and then we're down to one scrum half, I don't know. I don't think maybe the scrum halves can play for 80 minutes at that pace, but the pace that we played against South Africa was very, very fast. and that will kill a 9 over 80 minutes. That and the scrum half's going to be absolutely knackered. So yeah, you don't want to assume there's going to be an injury, but you need to plan, and you need to be prepared. I just hope it doesn't come back to bite us, and that sounds ominous, but I would rather we just had 3 scrum halves, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I reckon probably worth closing soon. I figure, just considering how this has gone, do you want to give a player you weren't particularly impressed with, and then tail off from that?
I wasn't impressed with over the weekend.
Well, yeah.
I'm not really sure. I mean,
or did you just not see enough to?
I wasn't that impressed with Yard. We do it every week where we bag on Yard.
Yeah, I think we should probably avoid that.
We should leave him.
You could bag on I tell you, you could try and bag on PSdT.
Oh my god!
The 2 dummies that Ben Young sold him.
For any South African fans, he has had an absolutely phenomenal Super Rugby season. He even played well in the Rugby Championship. And he's been, a major line-out stealer, point scorer, everything to do with South African rugby. He just got made to look like an absolute clown by Ben Youngs twice. Every time Young saw PSdT in front of him, he just went, "I'm gonna run. I'm gonna go." But guess what? There's a gap.
He sold the dummy. So I saw there were the best comments on coming through in the match thread of, Ben Youngs is going to go off to be a snake oil salesman after this, just because he's selling those, and it's just, I mean, to happen once is bad enough, but the fact that it happened again, and Farrell's try was almost a carbon copy of Ford's, you've got to feel bad for him. He didn't have a great game.
He didn't have a great those two moments he won't want to ever relive, and we know he's a great player because we've seen him, but perhaps. I don't know. Perhaps he needs to. I think he isn't he a. I don't know why I've got in my head that he's a second row. Maybe he is a second row. I think he's played. I've watched a lot of him playing, but I can't remember the number that he's ever had in his back. I've always seen him in the line out, and
I'm sure he's a flank. Oh no, you're right. He's a lock.
Yeah, he's a lock. There you go. So he was playing at 7.
Why is he playing at 7 then?
That's the fundamental problem. I think he was playing out of position. Trying to do a 7 role, and sure, he's possibly perfectly capable of doing it, but when Youngs has been around the block quite a few times,
he was against the last game against New Zealand, he was playing at 5.
Yeah. See, I think he's a very good lock, and I think he should, and he will from now on perhaps be kept to playing second row because that's his position. The problem is obviously they wanted. It's like okay, this is what it's like, and we'll end on this note because it's kind of an English centric thought. It's like having a Toje, Cruz, and Launchbury. You want all 3 of them on the pitch.
Yeah.
How do you get that to happen? The way you do it is you stick a Toje on the flank.
Yeah, but I'm so hesitant for that.
And this is what has almost been proven right by our hesitance. Is Toje is a different player from PSdT, but is he? He is a second row. He's played second row most of his life.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal at second row. But you stick him into I don't think you'd ever stick him in a 7 jersey, but maybe you would. I don't know. And maybe he comes a cropper.
I mean, the only way I can't. I mean, going forward, what I envisage is generally Itoje and Cruz starting with Launchbury on the. Launchbury on the bench, because
I thought Launchbury was phenomenal though.
He was again, one of the comments, someone saying he should be nicknamed the Mop just because he's clearing everything up. In the moment there was a loose ball on the floor, he pounced and he got it, and it's
him and Rob Shaw on the same
he
team.
Put in. It was, and granted, Courtney Laws is no slouch, but I feel like he needs a rest because, granted, he scored a try and on his 50th cap adds to the occasion, but I feel like he wasn't playing his best, and I feel like he played much better before. But what if, hypothetically, having the back line as, I mean, it's going to have to change at some point because Haskell's bound to retire, but having Itoje and Cruz at lock, having Robshaw, Haskell and Billy V on the back row, I mean, potentially having Launchbury and Laws on the bench, because then if you do have to move a back rower, then you can move Itoje or Launchbury to 6 and have the lock pairing. But the thing is, I'm so hesitant to see Itoje or Launchbury start at 6 because I don't think that it's a waste. I think it's an asset to have a lock who plays like a flanker than it is to have an extra lock on the pitch in place of a flanker just because they play.
And I think South Africa's found that out now, and they may not be doing it again. So I mean that's the way it is.
It's not bad.
Right, should we wrap it up then?
Probably, it's been a while.
Probably best to play the music.
Start playing it. It's run along on a bit. It's run along a bit.
You've got to go, haven't you?
Well, I've got about 20 minutes, possibly ish. Well, maybe not. I'll probably leave the moment I've done this.
All right, fair enough.
But I can't hear the music, or is it just playing over us?
you won't play. It's going to be post-production.
Normally I hear it. This is really disappointing. This has ruined the entire experience for me.
Bit of a letdown.
Yeah.
Oh, who's you heard it here. No, guys, you heard it here first. Ed hates the Welsh. Ed hates the Welsh. Oh, you stopped recording. Ed's just literally gone on a 10-minute rant about the Welsh. The Welsh. You can't hear it right now. He's still talking about hating the Welsh.